for taking the time to participate in this important conversation today. Throughout my 45-year social work career, there have been key moments in history that have signaled important social change. This is one of those moments, and you're a part of it. I want to take time to remember George Floyd and the many others who have died this year and in years past. The tragedy is so terrible. It's unbelievable. I direct you to the website mappingpoliceviolence.org, mappingpoliceviolence.org for the full accounting. I want to thank NASW members, our NASW California Board of Directors, our committees, and my staff for their participation. You should know and be proud that your professional association is conducting these types of events across the country, and we will also be convening a national summit. Every day, individual social workers are working towards the goals of racial and social justice. Their support of NASW, their professional association, multiplies their efforts in the work that NASW has and will be doing. I'm now going to turn it over to our membership director, Jolene Huey, who will go over the meeting logistics and instructions with you.
Thank you, Jan Lee. I'm so happy to see everyone here today. This is the first time that the chapter has convened this type of event, and it is a large one, so we're going to be learning as we go, so just bear with us. We're very grateful that you're all here with us. The event was sold out we were over capacity. We had to up it a couple times. We had over 300 people register for this event. So it's very needed, as you can tell. So I just want to tell you how we're going to conduct this meeting. It is going to be an open forum, and I have muted everyone just because of the size of the group, but we do want everyone to speak if you would like to. So people can say what they want. Ideally, you'll be expressing how you feel about the current situation in the country, and then share any ideas you may have on how social work at any level can help. We'd like you to use the chat box as another way to express how you feel, as we're not sure how many will be able to actually speak, but please utilize that chat box to network with one another, to share resources, because that is greatly needed at this time. I do want to let you know that if you do speak, you will be limited to 1 minute, just because there are so many of us, and we want everyone to be able to share what they're thinking. I do want to mention that we will be sending out some type of survey after this event, so that you can all share your ideas that way, and then we can distribute it to all of these attendees and anyone who wants to see it. Okay, so when you do want to speak, please use the hand raise button, which should be in the under participants. So you can raise your hand. I'm going to go over to all of our participants. If you're familiar with Zoom, you're all on my right side, and I'll just go down the list and I'll call on you. So I will try to do it in a fair and orderly fashion. It will probably be alphabetical because that's how I see you right now. But please, so once we prompt you to do that, please raise your hands. Okay, I'm going to turn it back over to Jan Lee, who will introduce a few speakers to start us off.
Thank you, Jolene. By the way, I want to express my deep appreciation to Jolene, because she's done a lot of work in helping me set up this event, and she's actually done a number of Zoom events for the chapter. So thank you so much, Jolene. Our first speaker is going to be, just for 1 minute, is going to be our chapter president, Dr. Sylvester Bowie. Jolene, you'll need to unmute Dr. Bowie. While we're waiting for the unmute, Dr. Bowie is a professor of social work at Sacramento State. He's a wonderful leader. He's been our chapter president and also other positions in the chapter. So he's certainly a person that we are very lucky to have as a leader of NASW. We're still waiting for the unmute button.
Dr. Bowie, it won't let me unmute you. Let me try. I'm trying. I think it's because so many people are still signing on, but let me try again. It will not let me unmute you. I'm so sorry. Hold on. Let me yeah, I'm so sorry. I don't know why it's not letting me unmute you. One second.
Maybe try unmuting everyone.
Okay, I think I'm on mute. I
got it.
Okay, so again, as was mentioned, let me say good morning. I'm a professor of social work at Sacramento State. And over the past few weeks, we have certainly seen some very disturbing images on our viewing screens. And unfortunately, these are images that have been familiar to our communities for the last 400 years. They've just not been captured in video form because now we have the ubiquitous cell phone, the smartphone, we can capture them. But these are images that are seared on the memories of many of us. And over the last couple of weeks, we have used terms like heartbroken and saddened, and I'm both heartbroken and saddened by what transpired in Minneapolis. Yet I'm very hopeful. I'm hopeful because I see a rebellion, I see protest, I see demonstration, and I see people of all color, ethnicities, racial group, national origin, and my spirit tells me that we will rise again over these circumstances. I'm hopeful that this country can live up to its expectation and its ideal of democracy, of rights, of liberty, of opportunity, and of equality for all its people. Yes, I'm hopeful that out of this terrible situation will come a lot of good. It is time to start the heavy lifting. It is time to start doing the hard work, especially if we believe that Black lives matter, and they do. I hope that we'll have a productive time over the course of the next 90 minutes as we interrogate some of the ideas and the assumptions that will be put forward in this discourse. Again, I'm very proud of NASW, the organization that I support, for the work that it's doing, and I hope we'll have a productive day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bowie. The next speaker is speaking on behalf of the California Association of Deans and Directors of Schools of Social Work, Dr. Mary Rollins at Azusa Pacific University. Mary is a tremendous supporter of professional social work and NASW, and I've really enjoyed working with her for many years now, and I'm so happy that she agreed to speak for 1 minute representing the Deans and Directors. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, John Lee, and NASW for providing this opportunity for us to be together. Like others, I am experiencing profound feelings of deep sadness and frustration, and again, am so powerfully reminded of my own privilege and how much I still need to grow and to learn and to understand. But I am also holding on to hope. I have been very encouraged how the social work programs across the state are collectively working together to find ways to not waste this opportunity. Social work education has long mandated that programs include content on diversity and making sure students understand how structures and systems perpetuate racism. But we need to go one step farther. Understanding and knowledge are not enough. And we have to go back to our curriculums and examine how and what we are teaching to make sure our students, and I would add there also our faculty, are provided the tools for action and for empowerment. Because effecting system change is a lifelong commitment, not just an assignment in a classroom. It is a marathon and it is not a sprint. And representing CAD, and I know I can speak for my colleagues, many of whom I see on this call, I want to speak on behalf of us that we commit to this reexamination and we commit to continuing to press against racism. And I'm really looking forward to being part of this conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Schools of Social Work in California are united in this effort. The next speaker is a member of our nominations committee, Venetia Kurd.
Janley, Venetia has not been able to get in. I have asked her to call in if she can. So can we move to our next speaker for now?
Okay, so we'll put Venetia on the list, and when she gets in, we'll have her say a few words. I want to ask Alex Brown, MSW, to speak next. He's on the Chico City Council, and a couple of important things about Alex. First is he's a social worker in elected office, which is a main goal of NASW to elect social workers through our CalPACE program. And he's at the local level, which is critically important when we're talking about police policies, police practices, and how we can influence those practices. Alex, thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you so much for the invitation. And I will say I go by she, her, or they, them, but I just wanted to, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm a social worker turned policymaker, and so I find myself in the very unique position of being able to influence policy change at the local level in the city of Chico. I'm a firm believer that social workers are going to be the profession that steps in to fill the gaps that our police force and law enforcement officers have been failing to fill and have been called to fill. And so, you know, at the city of Chico and around the nation, there's a lot of calls for policy reform. There's a lot of calls for police reform. And I believe in many of those efforts, particularly redirecting funding from the police department to social workers and social programs and toward the issues that are that we work on every day as social workers. But I want to call on our professionals in this call and in this field to not just be standing on the protest lines and participating in supporting our communities of color, but also supporting policy change and advocating for it. That's part of our education, that's part of our profession. And I want to be sure that all of us can make a commitment to being involved in helping to shape policy, inform policy, and use our privilege as professionals to influence it. So like I said, this is a very unique position to be in. We're working on some reform, at least to prioritize accountability and transparency of our local law enforcement officials. I'm advocating for some of those changes as we approach these longer term reforms and kind of redirecting some of those resources to getting to the root of some of the social problems our communities are facing. So thank you for having me on this call. Thanks for the opportunity to learn from all of you.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate your input and look forward to it. I believe Venetia is available by phone, so she's next.
Yes, I hope everyone's doing well today, and thank you guys for this opportunity. Just in light of everything that has been going on, similar to what some of the other speakers have said, I think as social workers, regardless of the capacity that you work in, I think we all have a responsibility to encourage and to promote change. And I just want to encourage people to engage in those uncomfortable conversations about race, not just in the mass level, but at the micro level as well, one-on-one, even if it may include engaging in conversation with new persons, new people that you don't usually speak to or you don't usually engage with. I encourage everyone to have those conversations in an effort to break down those barriers and to ask questions when you don't know rather than to assume. And despite there is a lot of chaos and just everything that's going on now, I'm hopeful and I do believe that it will encourage change in the near future, and that despite the negativity, it's pretty easy to get discouraged, but I just ask that we all remain positive and that we just keep pushing forward.
Thank you very much, Venetia. So I'm going to provide a little context for the conversation, and then we'll begin the conversation with Jolene recognizing speakers. So many of us in social work have asked, despite decades of work and effort, why are we in the situation that we are in now? And why hasn't more progress in racial and social justice been made? To get input, NASW is convening this conversation to hear directly from social workers about how they're feeling and what social work can do in terms of actions. We are recording this session and we'll share what we learn. We expect there will be subsequent sessions to refine and develop the action steps today, possibly by practice area, as social work is quite diverse. I want to acknowledge Chair of the Stanislaus School of Social Work, Dr. John Garcia, who provided a framework that I find personally very useful. I will share it to you. The 4 pillars of social justice. They are service, consciousness, policy, and power. Service, consciousness, policy, and power. So as you collect your thoughts to join the conversation and tell us how you feel and what you think should be done, you may find that framework useful to say, okay, well, I think social work and NASW can do something in this area. For example, Alex Brown is a perfect example of the area of power. By electing the right leaders and social workers to office, we are working in that area of power. So that's an example. To be fully anti-racist, we need to go beyond saying we're not racist. And we need to plan to do what we need to do to be anti-racist. We'll begin now. Please raise your hand to speak, and Jolene will recognize you. You'll have about a minute. We appreciate you limiting your time to allow others to speak. Thank you.
I don't see any hands.
Joe Nunn. I see Joe Nunn.
Okay. I do see hands. Hold on. Thank you for being patient with me. I may change this so that you can all unmute yourselves once I call on you, so I don't have to do this because this meeting is actually not as big as we anticipated. So I think it would be okay if we did that. Let me try to unmute Dr. Nunn here. He's not unmute. Oh, I've unmuted you, Dr. Nunn.
Okay, sounds good. I'm Joe Nunn, Professor Emeritus, UCLA Department of Social Welfare, and I'm also the first Vice President for the
Dr. Nunn, can you unmute yourself? Thank you, thank you.
You hear me now? To quote a commercial. What I was saying is, as social workers, we put an emphasis on self-awareness. And what it reminded me of is that, to paraphrase James Baldwin, to be Black and aware in America is to be in a constant state of rage. And we talked about sadness and being heartbroken, but the anger that persists in seeing these things happen over and over is something that we all carry with us. A good friend and colleague, Dr. Alex Norman, says, a black person, you never get a day off. And we can talk about that later on. What does that really mean that you don't get a day off? It means that every time you go somewhere, you have to reserve a part of yourself for something that may transpire, or something that may happen that you'll have to deal with. A lot of times it doesn't, but you're always carrying that around. What do you do with anger? Anger can lead to depression. It can mean anger can be directed at those around you. but it's a frustration at seeing this, to actually see someone's life taken right in front of us and seeing the nonchalant look on the officer's face. That's what really got to me. It wasn't like I'm taking a life. It's like, this is just what we do. So we've got an issue to deal with, and we've got to look at, we haven't talked about white supremacy or white privilege. White supremacy the door has been kind of open for it to reemerge in a strong way in our country. And white privilege was epitomized by the woman in the park who was challenging the bird watcher that she was calling the police. So we got a lot to do. And along the way, it's like managing that anger, because having that anger is not healthy.
Thank you, Dr. Nunn. I've known Dr. Nunn for many years now. He is an incredible social worker, and we are so lucky to have him in California, and for his long years of service, both in education and to the association. He's a wonderful person, and I really appreciate his remarks. And I too feel like really bad when we see things that we've seen and heard things that we've heard. So I'm going to answer a question that I see in the chat box, and then we'll go to the next speaker. If you click on the participant list at the bottom of your Zoom screen, at the very bottom of that participant list, you'll see some commands. One of them is a hand. If you click on that hand, you can raise that hand, and Jolene will call on you to speak. So we have a question from Matthew regarding, is there a centralized location where we can learn what local social workers are doing, whether they're organizing for protests, lectures, and research? So NASW has a leadership structure throughout the state. We have regional directors and unit leaders throughout the state. So depending on where you live, that may be the first point of contact. But also NASW has a long history in California of being part of all kinds of alliances, organizing with other organizations and associations. And in that way, our voice is even stronger. So I encourage people who are interested, contact their local leadership. Their names and contact information are on the NASW-CA.org website under regions. Also, check out the local organizations and associations in your area. And if they're doing something and you like what they're doing, contact them. You're the organizer, you know, tell them that you'd like to participate. You could bring your friends, you can bring your fellow social workers. You can be part of that effort. So I encourage you to do that. Okay, we're gonna go to the next speaker.
Ayaka, could you unmute yourself? And then after Ayaka, Kai, you will speak.
Hi, this is Chris. I'm a LCSW in Sacramento and LA. Thank you guys for doing this. Question, I want to know, can NASW and the California chapter take up a position in support of reparations? And the reason why is that I also, like Dr. Bowie, get really concerned that like we will lose momentum here. And there are so many issues, I think, when we're talking about what to really do to break up systemic oppression, whether is it healthcare, is it education, is it police reform? But I feel like the first step in all this is taking up a position on reparations. And then from that, other things can sprout out. And I would love if we can band together as social workers to support this position. Also, I'm curious with Alex. Alex, thank you. I appreciated what you said earlier of like, how do social workers, how can we get involved in policy? Because some of the thoughts I've had is how can we change the police department? So maybe a BSW is a requirement to be a cop, or at least a bachelor's degree. And how can we embed more social workers into the police department and have more civilian oversight? So two parts. One, can NASW take up a position on reparations? And then two, Alex, how do we get involved in policy? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. I'm going to ask, fortunately, I have one of our top staff in government relations and legislation, Rebecca Gonzalez. I know she at some day would like to be a PhD, but right now she's Rebecca Gonzalez. So I know there's a bill in the legislature authored by Dr. Shirley Weber from San Diego regarding a study on reparations, and perhaps Rebecca can fill us in a little bit more about the chapter position and what might be the surrounding context of that legislation.
Thank you, Janlee. Yes, there is a bill. It's AB 3121 by Dr. Weber from San Diego, and it is a task force that is to develop proposals for reparations. The chapter is in full support. This year, because of the COVID-19 crisis, the bills in the legislature were pared back significantly. I would say only about 40% of the bills that were introduced in January are still going forward, and this is one of those bills. The bill got out of fiscal committee on Wednesday, I believe, and that's a very difficult committee to get out of. So I do think our legislature is very committed to this issue. I think the main work will probably be done getting letters to the governor and getting his signature. I think he is supportive of these proposals, but he's always thinking about those fiscal issues. So that is what the chapter's doing at the state level. I'm actually not sure at the national level. I could try to look that up and see what's going on there. But we are definitely behind this bill, and we could put a call out to members at the appropriate time to get letters and phone calls into the governor's office.
Thank you, Rebecca. People in the chat box are saying, could you put the bill number, the bill's author, in the chat box for them? And the bill name, if you have that, or bill title. Chris, could you give me your second question again? I'm sorry.
Oh, yes. And my second question, thank you, Janlee, was just to Alex about how social workers can get involved. And then I had other suggestions about the police department. And I see Alex had posted some your information in the chat.
Thank you so much, everybody on the call. Alex has graciously offered herself up to be a source and an expert on this particular area, which I believe as a social worker she is, and deeply committed to social justice. So if you have questions, she's really a good source. Every jurisdiction that we live in has some sort of connection to law enforcement, whether it's a citizens advisory committee, or it's a police commission, or some entity, or for that matter, citizens can show up to City Hall. They can contact their council people and the mayor. But the best thing to do is organize that effort. And Alex, I know, can definitely help us as a social worker with the idea of how do we organize this input so we have more power and we have more influence in this process. Jolene, who's our next speaker?
I think Rosemary Alamo wanted to respond to the issue of the question that Chris had, or she wanted to share some information about social work and law enforcement. Rosemary? Sorry, Kai, you will be after Rosemary. Rosemary, you've been unmuted. You can speak if you would like.
Yes. Hello? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, good morning. I'm the Region I Director, Rosemary Alamo. This opportunity, thank you for providing this venue. And just wanted to speak to a little bit in reference to the question that came out, or the comment about having and with social work and law enforcement, and how do we get social work in law enforcement agencies, police departments. And right now we've been working very close and having, developing these partnerships and bringing in social workers into the police departments to work with them and work with the communities. So it's work that we have, we're working on, and we will continue to work on. And we are working closely with the community and the families and youth and officers that are part of these programs. And this is through USC Suzanne Dvorak Peck School of Social Work. I'm an associate professor there and oversee this initiative. And right now we're engaging in conversations that basically are allowing for us to move forward and having more presence of social work. So definitely would love to, you know, collaborate with Alex and anyone else that would be interested. So we've had about 30 interns in total this past year that just completed that internship. So again, these are internships that have been able to be facilitated. And so it provides us a venue by which we can be of influence, utilizing our, you know, social work skills and clinical skills to be able to influence the system, and in not only supporting the families, but again influencing the system, because we're actually inside the system, and to learn how to become stronger advocates as they understand how the system works. Right, so how they can better advocate for their clients as well, and have a voice for them. So that's just a little bit of the work that we're doing, and the interns are able to do both the micro and the macro work. So being able to influence also the policy that actually is in the process of being developed in the different divisions, and this is across LA County and San Bernardino County.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alamo. She is just a tremendous asset for social work. She has a direct connection to LAPD. And I know things have been somewhat chaotic in Los Angeles regarding LAPD and their treatment of protesters and their ordinary treatment of citizens. And as you can tell by my hair color, I remember quite well 1992 and Rodney King. So I am asking Dr. Alamo to serve as a resource to all of you. If she could put some contact information in the chat box. If you have questions about how to deal with LAPD, a huge, large organization, Dr. Alamo would be your entry point to talking about how LAPD is structured, what its divisions are, who are key people in LAPD, and more importantly, how do they get influenced? You know, what makes a difference? Who can you actually call and talk to or email and talk to that would respond to you? So thank you so much, Dr. Alamo.
No, thank you, Jan Lee. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm here to support in any way possible. So please, I'm gonna go ahead and put my cell phone and email on the chat box. Thank you.
Jolene, next speaker.
All right. Kai, you are up, and then Dr. Bowie, you are after Kai.
Hi, so my name is Kylon, but I go by Kai. No, yeah, I just kind of wanted to speak on my views of the situation. My day job, I am a community organizer with Mutual Housing California. We are based in Sacramento, California. At this time, to go along just to concur with a couple of points that were made in previous comments. I know that I do govern 3 communities within Sacramento. One of those communities is primarily African American. I can concur with what was said, that there is a large amount of anger within these communities when it comes to this topic of police brutality. That leads me to really just thinking that when we're offering suggestions of what we can do, I'm trying to figure out how I can get involved in the process as well. But I do think that there needs to be changes on the federal level. opposed to just like a local level or whatnot. And I don't know how, I'm fairly young, as you guys can see. I don't know how to really go about that. I'm kind of just starting in, you know, my endeavors. I do have my BA in criminal justice and just got my MA in social work. So I really am interested in this topic, but I do think that there needs to be some type of legislation on a federal level as it relates to police brutality, and kind of along the lines of what police should be accountable for, I guess you can say, because accountability is a big topic, I guess you can say, and a big source of outrage that I can see within the communities that I work with is just the overall accountability. Like, they're not held to the same standards as someone else that might had to have a tough situation, you know, and had to just think on their toes, per se. So I guess that's just kind of something that I wanted to give my suggestions on. And no, yeah, and if there's any ways that I can get involved, this is my topic of interest, this is where I kind of want to go towards, please let me know, because I'm taking notes of everyone's names in here who definitely have something to do with like the criminal justice system. So thank you, and that's all I had to say.
Thank you so much, Kai. Kai was our social work intern in the Sacramento office for NASW. She's a recent graduate of the online MSW program at California State University, CSUN. And she was a wonderful intern who really helped inform us so much about her community, her experiences, and vice versa. We also exchange our information with her, our experiences, our cultures, and that's the way it should be, sort of a mutual exchange and mutual respect. So thank you so much, Kai. I'm going to ask Rebecca Gonzalez just to briefly talk about our federal operations in Washington, D.C., kind of in response to Kai's question.
And Rebecca, you wanted to share some other information as well.
Right, right. So to Kai's question, at the federal level, I think what we really need to think about are the elections in 2020. And I think everybody needs to, well, of course, you're all going to vote, but getting involved in races, not just in California, but looking at other states. We really need to regain the US Senate to get traction on moving some more progressive legislation in this area. And I'll put this in the chat box, but I'm looking at oh, now my iPad is freezing, but it was showing some of the US Senate races that are really crucial coming up, such as in neighboring Arizona. That's a seat that Democrats really can capture. And, you know, many others. The Susan Collins seat in Maine is another example, but I'll put that in the chat box. So I think a lot of times before we can move policy, we have to make sure that we elect the right people. I wanted to also talk about, we need to pay attention at all levels of government, even things we're not even usually thinking about, like who is running for your local sheriff. If you could vote in that area, that makes a huge difference on how they treat the community. Also, your local or your DA, the district attorney, are they someone who believes in criminal justice reform? We need to pay attention to those races. A lot of congressional seats up this year that could strengthen our majority in the House. There were 7 swing seats we won in the midterms, mainly in the Orange County area and Central Valley. We need to hold on to those seats. And so getting involved at the local level I think it's really important to go to the city council meetings, board of supervisors, because these issues are being talked about right now. But NASW National, we have our national advocacy page. If you go to their advocacy button, and you could sign up for their alerts, and we'll be sending out more alerts at the state level also for legislation.
Thank you, Rebecca. Jolene, next speaker.
Dr. Bowie, you're up, and then I hope I say this correctly, Ragad Joseph will be after Dr. Bowie.
Okay, so I want to mention 2 things. One has to do with reparations. It's an area that I've dabbled in long before it became fashionable. I think maybe 12 years ago at a Carter G. Woodson public lecture, I talked about the issue of reparations. And I think while it's important that NASW support the legislation that's currently with the legislature, we should, if this is an area of interest for us, we should look at educating our members so that they can make the calls into the legislatures. Because if it's not an area of interest or knowledge, then people might not call in to say you should support this legislation. And I think a lot of research has been done on the issue of reparations. And so we could be deliberate in taking effort and making effort to inform our membership about the issue so that at least people maybe might feel more compelled to contact their local legislature regarding the legislation that is currently sitting at the Capitol. Because I'm willing to suspect that maybe a lot of people, even on this call, it's not the issue that they have urged your legislature to vote on. So I think NASW California can look at being proactive in talking about this issue. The second thing I just want to mention quickly is a few weeks ago, there was a video that went viral. A Sac State professor and his wife were verbally abusive to African-American woman that they live in the same apartment complex. And the N-word was used, and the professor even used his ownership of a PhD and his job at Sacramento State as some kind of badge of honor. I don't know if that allowed him to be abusive. But we in the Division of Social Work wrote a letter to the university, to the university president and to the faculty senate that I was serving on at the time. And I want to share just a brief part of that letter for the people from academia that are on this call that are looking at things that you might do in your own jurisdiction as far as responding to the issue that we're discussing here. And this part of the letter says that we implore all faculty to listen to and to rely on the wisdom of and support the advocacy of our affinity clubs and our communities and campus. We ask that our faculty and staff engage or re-engage with competency education and training that promote diversity, inclusion, and social justice, but moreover, specifically address ways to challenge and dismantle white supremacy, interpersonal and structural oppression, evidenced by racism. And this is maybe a key part, again, in terms of curriculum that we wrote in the letter, that we ask that all our colleagues audit our syllabi and curriculum for the coming year to honestly assess how much content give voice to and represent the scholars, research, media, and other content from marginalized people and oppressed community. And we ask that we all authentically have accountability within the university community. And the letter ends with this charge that I encourage us to contemplate also, that, that we being accountable to our student would involve community forums, mediated discussion, and restorative justice processes. And that was the essence of our letter from the Division of Social Work to the university. So I encourage you to start looking at your syllabi and just looking at what kind of content is being offered, what kind of discussion with oppressed communities, and doing things like mediated discussion, and start talking about restorative justice processes to address some of these systemic issues that resulted in the murder of this gentleman that we watched on live television. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bowie. I'm going to just make a couple of quick comments and answer some comments in the chat box. The first thing is reparations has a long history of controversy in the United States, and it has been opposed vigorously across the country. So I think it's important that if you believe in reparations, and I encourage you to do your research, as Dr. Bowie says, I think you will find that it is quite justified and necessary. I heard Reverend Al Sharpton give an address at the George Floyd Memorial in Minneapolis. And part of his statements just really rang a bell for me. There's a huge debt that needs to be paid, a huge debt. The debt that's owed to not only people that have struggled and tried to make things right in this country, but also to the descendants of the enslaved people that were brought here from Africa against their will. This debt has come due now. This debt has come due now. So that would be the starting off point for a discussion about reparations. But even more importantly, when we get together and we organize and we try to get votes for reparations legislation, NASW can prepare and will distribute solid, really well written talking points. Because again, through the history, there's some opposition and we need to find a way to counter that opposition. And of course, our legislative director, Rebecca Gonzalez, will be helping with that effort. The other thing Rebecca wanted me to say is that we have political action operations at the state and federal level for these coming elections. And it's usually done through committee work. And NASW members can join these committees. We have NASW members on the state PACE committee, and we have NASW members on the National PACE committee. That's where decisions are made about which candidates will be and are supported. We are consulted by our national office when they have candidates that they would like our input on regarding support in the coming elections. Also, it's really important if you identify a candidate at either level that you think deserves NASW's political action support, that candidate needs to complete and submit a candidate questionnaire, In the heat of a campaign, sometimes that's overlooked and some candidates don't respond. So again, we need your help in identifying candidates that should be supported. We cannot support all candidates. We're not some huge multinational corporation that has a fortune, spends millions of dollars in political action contributions. But we can spend some money, but even more importantly, organize grassroots support to get out the vote for those candidates. So I think it's important that we all, that's one pillar of social justice, as Dr. Garcia has pointed out, that we can all engage in. So let's keep your eye out for candidates, and if they deserve our support, let us know. If they submit a questionnaire, we'll let you know. Next speaker.
Rigod Joseph is next.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I am Rigod Joseph. I'm assistant professor with Cal State University San Bernardino School of Social Work. What I see is missing in this issue is the gap between NASW and the public. I think there is a lack of trust on leaders here and the media. The public doesn't trust the media, the pundits, and the politicians. So there is a penury, there is a gap to be filled. In social work at the national level, the NASW could step in to fill that gap. But all the effort so far has focused on us. We go to Washington every year and DC, and then we participate in posters, presentation, and then conference and everything. Everything is toward us. But we know what to do. We don't kill people. We don't put our knees on blacks' neck. No, we don't do that. We know what to do as social workers. We are good people most of the time. We're good people, okay? The Council of Social Work Education does the same thing. Educate us, we go to Florida, we go to Disney World, we go everywhere, and then we receive formation. We know what to do, but the public doesn't. The police officers don't know what to do. So our focus should be how to send our message to the public. But when I look over the past few years, we haven't seen a social work presence at the national level. I don't see them on CNN. I don't see people from NASW on Fox. I don't see them on CNN, on national media. I don't see them pen opened. So we disappear. We just withdraw. And then we confine ourselves to ourselves. Everything is for us who are already good people. Okay? But we have to go there and educate the public, and we don't make a good use of the National Social Work Month. When the Reagan administration gave us the National Social Work Month, because they gave us a platform to go there and make a difference. What do we do with that month? Every year we organize something for ourselves, not for the public. No march. We have to have a march even before someone is killed by the police, to educate the police, because we are a neutral organization. We are not a political organization. No, we have a profession based on evidence-based practice, like on science. Okay, when we take the street, for example, next year to march on behalf of the poor, that will be significant because we made a long-term commitment to advocate with and on behalf of those who are behind. So it's our job when we go to Washington for a meeting, for a conference, after the meeting, we can make a march to represent the rights of those who are left behind. So what we cannot do is to let that to other people, to political science or someone else, or the pundits on the media. They are not going to do a good job, because no other professions have made a commitment to work with the nation's most marginalized citizens. Only social work does. That's the difference between social work and other professions. We are the one that says we need to work primarily with those who are marginalized. So it's NASW's duty to organize march every year on behalf of those people before something happens. It doesn't have to be reactionary to react to something that happened. But before that thing happened, we have a constant presence on the national level, especially during the National Social Work Month on March. That's what I think might send a signal to say, hey, don't mess with our people, because there's a strong presence there to educate the public. I don't want to learn not much from NSW or CSWE, because I know what to do as a social worker. I got a bachelor's degree, I got a master's degree, I got a PhD, all in social work. I don't want to, I'm already there. I won't kill people. You want to educate the public now to let them know what we stand for and what they can do to be a better society. That's what I think myself. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Joseph. Your comments are actually echoed by many social workers around the country. And it is a tremendous struggle to do the work that we need to do, to organize, to protest, to do marches. It's really, really very hard. And we try. I know that at least at the local level here in Sacramento, NASW local members and staff have often been a part of the marches here in Sacramento, and also in other communities like Los Angeles and other communities like the Bay Area. But again, it's a small presence, and certainly even smaller at the national level when they have national marches. We will try harder, because your point is well taken. We will try harder. But I also encourage all members who have strong feelings like you do and really excellent things to say to run for NASW leadership. That's how our organization works. It's not Janley Wong or other staff telling people what to do. it's really our leadership on the board of directors, both at the national and state level, that really guide and direct our efforts. So your power, your energy would be unbelievable on the national board in Washington, D.C. It would be just the energy they need. And I hope you will consider running for office. I'm gonna check some of the chat comments, and I think I'm gonna ask Rebecca Gonzalez again, because she's really our go-to person regarding the issue of criminal justice reform, you know, no bail, reducing mass incarceration, diverting people from going into custody. There's been lots of legislation over the years, lots of policy work done in this area, and I'll ask Rebecca to kind of give us a quick synopsis of that.
I wasn't unmuted. I should go find that question, but actually NASW has become much more involved in the whole criminal justice reform issue in the last 4 or 5 years, as has the legislature. The California legislature has been very focused on those issues. A few years back, the getting rid of bail, that was one of our lobby days issues, and that is something that did pass in California, and they're still, you know, working out the kinks there. But we have been very, very involved in not only issues to reduce automatic sentence enhancements. If people were around in the 80s and 90s, that's all the legislature did. They put in automatic sentence enhancements for just about everything out there. We're very involved in those issues. We're very involved in reducing or getting rid of all the fines and fees that build upon folks. So poor folks who have, you know, maybe had a traffic violation and they can't pay it, and then it spirals, they lose their car, you know, and it just goes downhill from there. We're very involved there, but we're also involved in social workers who have a past criminal record who may want to get their license. We have one council, the Rehabilitation and Inclusion Council, that is there to counsel social workers who might have past offenses, because we need social workers with that kind of lived experience to really speak to the community that has been oppressed and may have a record and is trying to, you know, trying to get out from under that. So we have been very, very involved in the criminal justice reform space and expect to be in the coming years.
Thank you, Rebecca. Next speaker, Jolene.
Dr. Nunn? Dr. Nunn, can you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me now? Okay. The issue I wanted to talk about has to do with education and training. A few years ago, I was an expert witness for a young man. He happened to be a 400-meter Olympic athlete who was really harassed and abused by the security personnel at Magic Mountain. And here's a guy that everyone should look up to, and yet he was put through the situation primarily because he's African American. I looked at their training manual, and it was good. It echoed what we were teaching at UCLA in our cross-cultural awareness class. So what's the problem? Education and training are necessary, but they're not sufficient, because when that person comes out of training and goes out to the job, the guys that have been there for a long time say, hey, forget all that stuff you learned up in the academy. This is how we do it out here. And that's what's happening with our police officers. I support reparations. I realize there are a number of issues that need to be tackled, but number one, stop killing us. Stop beating us, stop killing us. And I think we have to begin to look at issues related to culture and how we go deeper than the education and training. I heard a presenter up in Canada speak. She was from Newfoundland. and she did training on diversity. And what she said is that some people look at diversity training as an inoculation. I've had that already. I don't need it anymore. What we're doing here is so important because I respect what Dr. Joseph said about social workers knowing what to do, but I think we need to work on ourselves constantly. Even though we have the training and education, we too have to be aware of some of our blind spots and some places that we need to look at as well. So I think it's a complex situation that we need a variety of strategies to deal with it.
Thank you, Dr. Nunn. I want to make a quick comment on that too. I know that many schools of social work have some kind of connection or affiliated, allied with criminal justice programs in the university. And as we know, many people in those criminal justice programs go eventually into law enforcement. So I would make a plea to schools of social work, and I plan to follow up on this with CAD, that they redouble their efforts to work with criminal justice programs to help influence the training, the culture, the ideas of people who eventually will enter into law enforcement. I think that's really an important connection, and it could be done relatively soon. Again, many of my colleagues in the universities have good connections to their criminal justice program counterparts. Jolene, next speaker.
Kristen Nurkowski, and then Pat Salgado, you wanted to speak, so you'll be after Kristen.
Hi, everybody. I am Kristen. I just kind of wanted to put my experience out there, going back to what Joseph was saying about educating the public. I'm in San Diego right now, but before coming out here, I spent 10 years in the criminal justice system in New Jersey, 5 years with juveniles and 5 years with adults. I literally watched these young men grow up in the system. So I'm very much aware of the systemic issue from in basically every aspect and how it's gotten to be here. So I do want to educate the public. So I've been posting on social media, and I have been met with, like, so I believe that there is a disconnect between white America's experience and what disadvantaged populations experience. And so I do believe there are a lot of good-meaning, well-intentioned people out there that are misinformed or unaware of what the real issues are because they don't see it. They only see the few handful of cases that are even in the media when it happens every day, and most of them go unreported. So I don't know what, I've been trying to educate, it always goes back, I've been telling people to watch the 13th. I've been trying to get people in the right direction to educate themselves on the issue since I believe, I forget who it was that was saying we need basically in our school systems to start teaching American history more accurately, to be more empathetic on the issues. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to say I am trying my best in my corner. I do want to get involved any way I can. I don't want to say policing the police, but if there's something we could do like that on federal levels, changing laws, whatever we could do, I'd like to get involved. But yeah, just in my corner, having those conversations, because I do have a master's degree and I do have so many years experience and I am white, I feel like I can speak from my personal experience and be heard, as opposed to just arguing back and forth about facts that there shouldn't even really be a dialogue about. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Kirsten. I want to point out that we social workers work in every field that has some sort of touch or contact with the law enforcement justice system. For example, many social workers work in child welfare. They come into contact with law enforcement constantly. This is where social workers can directly have a conversation with the law enforcement partners that they work with in child welfare. I mean, think about it. Thousands of social workers work in child welfare, and those thousands of social workers have contacts with law enforcement. Now, we do need to help those social workers, because when you work with somebody, sometimes you don't want to say anything to them. You know, you feel like, look, we're working together. If I say something, that'll mess up our working relationship. We need social workers to learn how to have the conversation with a law enforcement partner who's racist. You know, let's start there. I mean, education, but we can go even farther. We can question police practices as social workers who have contact with law enforcement. I feel very strongly that this is one of the ways that we can address Dr. Nunn's point, that police have to stop killing Black people. You know, let's just lay it out there. And one of the ways we can do, using our numbers and using all the practice fields that we work in, we can make contact, we can influence, we can try to turn this around a little bit just through our daily jobs. So I'll be talking about this and pushing this after this conversation because I believe so strongly in it. Jolene, next speaker, please.
Pat Salgado wanted to speak. Pat? Pat, are you there? I don't see Pat on here anymore. Maybe she had to drop off. I don't have any other speakers, but I know that someone did have a question about addressing mental health with Black communities in a clinical setting. If anyone wants to comment on that.
Well, I can say a few words about that. First of all, it's pretty clear that communities of color, in particular, African American, Latino, and Asian cultures and communities are not well served by the mental health community. And there are a tremendous number of reasons why. Many of us know what those reasons are. And in order for us to really try to figure out how to change all of that, we may need to really dramatically change how mental health services in the United States are delivered. They are delivered somewhat on a medical model with some community mental health input and influence. They're generally being delivered by people who are most of the time not of the same culture, not of the same ethnicity as the people they're trying to serve. And we know that mental health departments do make an effort to reach out to communities, particularly Latino communities, using different folk and cultural outreach techniques, but it's not enough. Underserved, and it's even more important and significant now because there's tremendous trauma going on right now in this country. It's been going on for years and years and years, but a tragic event triggers so many people right now, not only African Americans, but others. And the trauma that goes along with that, the trauma that's revealed, the trauma that comes out is a tremendous mental health event right now. So I yesterday made comments to the California Licensing Board for LCSWs, the Board of Behavioral Sciences, and I put it right there to them directly. I said, you all need to have a lot of input and presentation on the issue of how to be an anti-racist, because this directly affects the clinicians that are licensed by the state of California, and it affects the training that the Board of Behavioral Sciences requires of clinicians. So I will follow up with our licensing board, but we also need to figure out how to work with county mental health departments as well as the Mental Health Services Act, and we will follow up on those too.
Thank you, Janlee. Mary Rawlings and then Vincent Orozco.
Hi, I just wanted to respond to the request in terms of mental health and the Black community, and just wanted to put out there one of our faculty, Dr. Jennifer Payne, has done a lot of research in trauma in the Black community, as well as looking at sort of secondary trauma for pastors in inner cities, as well as for therapists, and has been working to develop a culturally adapted or culturally responsive model using acceptance and commitment therapy. And she's in some behavioral health groups that are really looking at how to make some of this training really widely available to therapists and providers so that people can really be better equipped to address trauma in the Black community. So again, she's a faculty at APU, and I will try to let you know, Jan Lee, if I hear any more word on specific trainings.
Okay, I want to make a comment. I see something about supporting students of color, Black students, and others in MSW programs. There's two things going on here. The first thing is monetary support. People need help paying for their college education, especially at the MSW level. So there's been some small progress there in terms of loans and scholarships, but nothing like we need. So that's an area that schools and schools of social work in particular can redouble. You know, do we have enough scholarships? Do we need to create more? How do we create more? Again, back to, if you haven't seen it, I hope it's somewhere out on YouTube, Dr. Reverend Al Sharpton's remarks at the George Floyd Memorial. He said every university in the United States should start a George Floyd scholarship. And he said the university that he was speaking at yesterday, the memorial was held at North Central University in Minneapolis. They have already started a George Floyd scholarship. So I think that's a visionary goal. It's something that we can take on. I'm going to bring it to the deans and directors of the schools of social work in California. How can we do this? How can we create more scholarships and more support for students of color in our social work programs?
Thank you. Vincent, you're next, and then Dr. Bowie.
Hi, so I'm a social worker with homeless services, and I wanted to kind of talk back on when we were discussing having social workers in the police force. So in homeless services, there's a practice in LA that happens when they go clear out homeless encampments. And so since we weren't able to stop those clearing out of the encampments, we attempted to accompany the police and the LAPD and go from encampment to encampment to try to connect them to resources. But I think the biggest issue with that situation is it led to a very difficult approach from the police, which caused rapport building extremely difficult for us. And so even having social workers with the LAPD is not necessarily enough. I think it has to happen within the LAPD, because when we got a name connected to the LAPD, or when we showed up with them, everyone shut down and refused to speak with us for good reason, because how they were being treated. And in LA, in homeless services, there's a large percent of people that are people of color. And I think it's really important not just to accompany the LAPD, but as they were talking about, actually become part of the LAPD, be more integrated in it. Even if it was something down to requiring some kind of services or education, more than education, like almost like mental health services that prepare them to be more prepared to approach these populations, not just homeless populations, but all the populations. Because I feel like that situation, the fact that social workers couldn't even go and speak to these people and connect them to resources because of how LAPD was treating them during this, I think that speaks a lot to the larger issue we're having at the moment. So I think more than just being part of the LAPD, I think we have to be integrated within the system.
Thank you, Vincent. Excellent comments. The challenge is the cultures are different, the social work culture and law enforcement culture. And we've attempted to bridge that over the years, starting with I'm aging myself, decades ago, the community-oriented policing programs that were popular in those days. It's still very difficult to do that. I do want to say, though, that we shouldn't give up hope, and that social work has so much to offer to police forces, to LAPD. So, for example, if they would only listen to us, and again, those who have contacts with LAPD and other law enforcement organizations, let's get the dialogue started before it gets to a point where, oh, we have to get these people out of here today, and we better call the social workers and have them come over and help us. But our main goal, by the way, is just to get them out of here. You know, by then it's really late in the process. So how do we approach law enforcement, LAPD, and we say, look, we're here to help. We can help you do these things. And we know what they are. You know, we know what they are. So let's talk about it. Eventually, we're going to need to figure out what to do with so many of the persons without housing who've been placed in Project Room Key shelters and rooms and hotels, et cetera, due to COVID. You know, this is such a wonderful opportunity for us to demand, to lobby for maintaining Project Room Key after COVID is over. It's going to be extremely challenging because of the money situation. And by the way, hiring at LAPD and other law enforcement is going to be dramatically impacted also, not only by the budget crisis, but by the demand of the community in saying, let's transfer resources from police forces, from LAPD to services and programs that help people in the community. So there's going to be a struggle on this, but we social workers are not unfamiliar with struggles, and we're not unfamiliar with budget issues, and we're not unfamiliar with how to do advocacy. Next speaker, please.
Okay, Dr. Bowie, and then Dr. Nunn after Dr. Bowie.
So, colleagues, I'm going to maybe say something that might not go down well, but I'm going to say it anyhow. You know, organizations like NASW, of which I've been a part ever since I got my BSW, like we are status quo type organizations. You know, like scholarships and training is not going to work. You know, for the Title IV-E program, we have been having that program for 20 odd years, offering scholarship to students, and the disproportionality of African-American kids in the foster care system still continues. In Atlanta the other day, 6 cops that dragged these college students, 4 of them were African-Americans. The system is broken. And where we have systemic problems, it doesn't matter how much dressing up we do around the edges. We could give 100 black scholarships a year to students. If they're being educated and trained to go out in a broken system, we will continue to have the same result. No matter how much new wine you make and pour it in an old dirty bottle, it's gonna mess it up. So what I'm saying here, we need radical changes, and it might mean breaking down some systems and starting all over. Like, believe me, like scholarships are not gonna, it's nice to offer scholarship, but it's not gonna deal with a problem. Training is not gonna do it. Like, we have to dismantle the system that perpetuate the kind of activities that we're talking about. I'm gonna say it again. It's been 400 years since Black people in the West have been dehumanized, and we have had all kinds of commissions. We have done all kinds of stuff, and it still happens. And Black police officers do the same thing that white police officers do. So I'm just saying, we need to dismantle. We need to change systems that perpetuate themselves. I heard the mayor of the city in New York where the cops pushed down the old 75-year-old man. I heard this mayor who is African American like talking and justifying why the other cops walk past the guy because they're trained to keep going, and other people who are trained in CPR would stop to render assistance. Really? We have to dismantle the system that perpetuate the kind of things that cause us pain every once in a while, and then we go on to doing our business just like we always do it. We have to dismantle these systems.
Thank you, Dr. Bowie. Jinli, did you want to say something?
Next speaker.
Can't really follow that up. All right, so Dr. Nunn, I think you'll be our final comment. We're actually getting close to the end of time. So Dr. Nunn?
That is hard to follow, Jim. I was thinking about the question earlier about police working with social workers. And the way we go about things doesn't make sense. The police go out to remove homeless from certain areas, and they send social workers along with no co-training together. They don't know each other. Excuse me. And as Jan Lee says, there's two different cultures there altogether. So social workers do know how to connect people and do know how to help people communicate. But again, we have to get these people thinking more strategically about how they do things rather than, okay, today we're going to go do this. And there's no preparation. So there is a role for us. The last point I want to make is I want to go back to who we are as a profession. And that is where we need to look at ourselves in terms of changing a system, because we're in among these systems that are often dysfunctional. And recognize, and this is controversial, that as social workers, I maintain we're agents of social control. We don't like to hear that because we like to see ourselves as helping people, doing good. But if you work in corrections as a social worker, you absolutely cannot avoid recognizing that you're an agent of social control. And how you bring social work values to that situation, how you train others, is essential if we are indeed planning to make a difference. Start with ourselves. That's what we tell clients. Start where you are. Start where we are. And then think about where we need to go in sort of addressing complex issue. And again, I want to emphasize, stop killing us.
Thank you, Dr. Nunn. I also want to say, based on the comments you've made and Dr. Bowie, that we should go to city government, to our city leaders who have influence over the police departments. And we should say, you know what, send in social workers first. You know, what are your policy goals regarding people who are living on the streets? And we'll tell you what needs to be done. Someone said it already. We know what needs to be done. We're social workers. But we need to be prepared. And one of the things that we need to be prepared for is the fiscal argument. You know, if we're going to go in and help people off the streets of Los Angeles or any other community in our state, we're going to need the tools to do that. And those tools include resources for housing, for addiction treatment, for mental health treatment. We all know that. We're social workers. But let us try. Send us in first. You know, don't send us in with the police. You know, we don't need the police. We can do it, but you need to give us the tools to do it. So one of our board members, Janthi Daniel, is in the mayor's office and works a lot on homeless issues. So I'm going to be speaking to her regarding this idea. And I know it's going to be challenging. And by the way, if you don't know already, Mayor Garcetti is very disliked by LAPD right now because he wants to transfer $150 million from the LAPD budget. But you know what? We support him. You know, that's what we should be doing. So I'll be talking to Janthi about these ideas and what we've learned today. So I'm going to wrap it up by saying thank you, and we've learned a lot from each other. This has been a tremendous discussion and conversation. I am really humbled by everybody's comments and their insight and their demands. You know, it's fine. We haven't done enough and we need to do more, and all of us should be tasked with that. I'll be asking chapter staff to help us digest all of this, put it into a set of actions, and we'll be sharing that with you because we still want your input. While our experiences are unique and individual, they can be grouped by our identities. No one group has endured more racism and violence than our African American communities. They have survived 400 years of oppression and demonstrated their resilience, but so have the oppressors. If one group is oppressed, then we all are. All of us are in the struggle today for a racially and socially just society. Thank you so much for participating today. And Jolene's going to make additional comments about follow-up and an evaluation survey.
So as I said earlier, we will be putting together some type of survey. We do want to hear from you. I know we didn't get to tackle every issue. It was a good starting point for us. And like Janlee, I'm very thankful for all of you. And I'm also very humbled by everything I've heard today. So yes, we will be following up with you. We will also have this recording available for those who were not able to make it. And I don't know, anything else, Janlee?
No, but thank you very much and have the good part of the rest of your Saturday.
Yeah, thank you very much, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.